Hi again, everybody. It's Kevin Knessa coming to you from the newsroom of The Observer and TheObserver.com on this, the 5th day of September in the year 2023. Sure glad you joined us. And as you do each and every Tuesday, you welcome me into your home so that I can bring you this week's news. But we're going to do things a little bit different this week because we have a special guest with us today. It is Syd Ferreira, a man who you know, who has run for mayor first in 2021. He's running again this year in the special election in 2023. He was the first candidate to accept my invitation to join us live, and he joins us today, and we're going to talk about parking. Syd, welcome. Good to have you with us. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Welcome.
Let's just dive right into this. First of all, you decide you're going to run, and you're faced with one of the biggest issues that the town has seen in a long time. So tell me what the problem is and what your solution is going to be to try to get this situation solved. It's an enormous task.
Thanks for having me on, Kevin. Thank you to everyone who's going to be watching today, who's watching now, and possibly watching the video afterwards. I love the fact that people are involved, and as you saw during that parking meeting, Kevin, I mean, it was phenomenal, the amount of people there. I gave everyone a shout out when I went up to speak, and this is what I invite. I want more public involvement, more resident involvement in our town and the way it functions and the way it is governed. I think that parking is one of the major problems that's facing our town, and it is because it has been ignored for so long. And maybe not ignored, it's been discussed before, but there really hasn't been anything fundamental done to change the course of where we're going. I mean, we've just exacerbated the problem. We've added more and more developments, more and more variances when when there's new construction, and also when there are renovations done to buildings and to other properties. So I think that's all added to the issue that we have. And I think that the solution that has been proposed with parking permits, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but I think it has to be done a little bit differently. So, it's called a public municipal utility, but that's not what we were sold during the meeting. There's a gentleman who is a sitting county commissioner who's going to be in charge of rolling it out and is going to be paid a significant amount of money for doing so. And we were told that, with $15 per permit, that it is going to pay for itself. So we're going to pay $1.09 million to have it administered. And then we are going to pay, I think it was 3 or 4 different people that are going to be hired by this utility to run it on a daily basis. The numbers don't make sense to me. It doesn't add up. And so I think that this is just something that, in order to have the public be okay with it, for some people, yes, a lot of us, adding any kind of surcharge to our property taxes or our rent is significant. Whether or not it's $15, it doesn't matter. We're all in different financial situations, so we don't know. We can't judge, based on that. But, there have been plenty of times where we're sold trial offers, and that's what I think that this is. This is like, hey guys, get on board. It's only $15. But then we realize a year or two down the road that we don't have enough money to continue the program. And so it's just, over time, it's going to be more and more and more, because as we know, taxes don't go down, surcharges don't go down. They could, and we have a plan for that. But we've been promised so many times that things will go down eventually, or they will stay stable, and they don't. They just increase because there's certain things that you can't control. Expenses always go up. But I just can't see us running an authority for $15 every 2 years continuously with permits. There are other ways that we can do this. Like I mentioned, we can do it underneath the Kearny Police Department. Just hire more enforcement officers, and we could do it that way. So there are other options that can be explored, as opposed to just having an outside firm come up in here and just take over. Create an authority and then just slap a name on it and call it a public utility when we know that that's not what it is.
Okay,
So
so number one, we're going to start off by nixing the whole idea of a parking utility authority, whatever you want to call it, right? And
100%.
and you think it should be under the guise of the police department. So, talk about how many people you think we need to hire. Do we need to have multiple shifts where people are out at nighttime and overnight hours? Where do you stand on that?
So that's something that yet to be determined. I think that, you know, it's been discussed that 3 or 4 different people to work, in this department, in this, sub department within the police department. The way that I think that it should be run, I think that that would be sufficient. And then over time, I think that we can, you know, we can see what we need going forward. Uh, but I just don't think it's something that we should take out of the hands of our town and give it to someone else to run. It's too big of a program. There's too many things that can go wrong. We need full control of this utility, right? And we're being told that it is going to be controlled by the town. But so why do we need a third party to be involved? That's my concern with it,
Right.
especially when it's a private firm and it's someone who in charge of the firm who is politically connected in our area. And so I don't think it's a good idea. I
Do
think
you
it's
think it
just
was a mistake to
complicated.
hire him in the first place, Bob Basilis?
I don't know Robert Basleys, but there are several conflicts of interest. As you know, he was as a sitting county commissioner, he was Mayor Al Santos's boss, in his capacity as clerk to the commissioners. And he also now became the boss of another Councilman Zapata, who's also wrote the ordinance for this. So, this screams for me. It screams conflict of interest all over the place. So that's another reason why it needs to be axed. The way that it is right. Before you ask me, Kevin, what we should do, I don't know if you want to go into that right now because I kind of now I realize it didn't really answer your question, or do you
Go
want
ahead.
to
It's
just follow
okay.
it up?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I think that there are certain things that we need to do before we start looking at permits or before we start looking at anything else. So my contention with a permit, especially selling a permit, is that we don't have, and you're never going to have guarantee of parking. So let's be frank about that.
Right.
But how can we sell something to people regardless of the cost? We're told $15 now. Who knows how much it will be in 2 years? But you're telling people here, buy this piece of paper, but it's essentially a worthless piece of paper because it's not guaranteeing anything. You're not getting, at least, you get a handicap decal, you can use your handicap
Right.
decal, when you go to the store or anything, but in this case, there really is no guarantee. So I just think that's why I believe it should be under the police department. And if we do create something like this, it should be, a free program. And maybe it should be limited to certain parts of town where we know the problem issues are. Most of the second ward, first ward, and there are other parts of other wards that have issues as well, and maybe that's something that needs to be targeted. But I don't think it's something that we should necessarily charge people. So we have to, like I said, in the letter to the editor, we have to increase the supply. We've got to find areas where we can build lots, parking structures. We need more of that. I know some people don't like the fact that they don't like to see certain parking structures. They think that it's an eyesore, but we've already crossed that bridge. We already have so many developments. We have nearly 1,000 new apartments in town. We're going to have more. So unfortunately, we've gone down that road. So we
Well,
have to rush.
let's look at that a little bit. You mentioned the possibility of maybe annexing property to build more parking structures. Have you identified any areas in town where you think that might be beneficial, where you might be able to, I don't want to say use eminent domain, but that's probably the most logical way to do it, where you would be able to take some land and build some parking, either lots or structures? Have you identified anywhere specific yet?
I don't, but we do have certain. We do have. So I've been looking at a list where we have vacant properties, and I did this, about 2 years ago when there was a property in question in town, where a resident, for the last 20 years had been looking to have the town take care of an abandoned property, and it was causing all kinds of problems in their neighborhood. So with that, I found a list of a bunch of properties that the town owns or that are vacant. So that's maybe where we would start, and we would identify the areas that need the most. So, that's where we can start. I don't necessarily mean annexing by eminent domain. There's other ways to do it. I mean, we can purchase property, so that's something that we can do as well. I don't like that word eminent domain. I don't. That's government control of things, and that's kind of a slippery slope. I don't want to go there. So we would do it the right way. We would compensate people for their property
So where
as
do you
well.
come up with where does the money come from for something like that? That's not easy to just say, we'll buy the property. So how do you come up with the funds for something like that?
Well, like I had said 2 years, if I get into office, we are going to look at the budget. We're going to look at the budget. We're going to look at it line by line, call it a forensic audit, call it whatever you want. But there are certain things that I know that I'm being, that I hear that we're spending money on that is unnecessary. So we have to first cut our expenses, and we have to see, we have to get new developers to pay what they're supposed to pay. So we have to increase revenues, we have to decrease expenses, and we have people that are going to be looking into that. So already have people that have signed on to the campaign and signed on possibly to be a transition team that's going to be looking at all of these things. So there will be money for different things.
Okay. I guess what I'm looking at there is that where do you cut in order to make that kind of money in order to build these parking facilities and structures? Because it's a lot. We're talking a lot of money here, right? If you're going to look into some of these properties, so what kind of spots maybe would you cut that you would use in order to switch the money and put it toward parking structures or parking lots? What kind of areas have you identified so far there?
Well, I don't. It's not something that I want to go into full specifics just yet. We will, but we still have people that are looking at, but and there's certain things that we don't have access to. So once we are in there, it's something that we can definitely identify. And there's other areas as well. Like I said, we have to increase. There's a lot of development in town. I think we discussed this last time in the 1980s, or I discussed it somewhere along
Right.
the campaign trail. In the 1980s, we had a shift of tax burden from South Kearny, from the industrial area, over to the residential area. And that was done because in the 80s and even before that, it was, our industry was decimated. So, taxes were shifted over to the residential side. So maybe there's an opportunity there with all of the development going on. We have development in the retail area. There's development all over the place. And there are many, from my understanding, there's at least 4 or 5 different, plots that are looking to be developed for residential use as well. So we have to make sure that we stop these tax abatements and these tax breaks that are just taking money away from our budget.
We're talking to Syd Ferreira, who is running for mayor in Kearny, and he is on the Republican ticket. We're talking about the parking situation. You mentioned that there were a couple of properties that you thought maybe were blighted or that maybe the town could consider purchasing. Where are some of those spots? Because I want to know where they are, because I really want to find these places and go photograph them, because I don't see it when I drive around. I don't see much open space or that many dilapidated properties. So can you talk about a little bit about some of those
Well,
locations?
it's not even just the dilapidated properties, Kevin. So it's just, when we have new developments, for example, that was part of the plan with increasing supply. So when we have new developments, we have to, stop giving, generous parking variances to developers, especially large developers. We have to encourage them to build more parking. We have to work with them. We have to work with them to encourage them to build more parking. And we have to also, I don't know if there's, a way that we can do this, but it's something to look into. We have to tell them, listen, if we have developers that have gotten very generous tax breaks, 30 years in some cases. We have to tell them there's no reason why you have a tenant that pays $2,500, $2,800, $3,000 in rent for their apartment, and then on top of that, you charge them $250, $200, $150 for a parking space. Because what's going to happen then is people are going to refuse to pay for those parking spaces, and they're going to bring their cars onto the streets, and that just creates an even bigger problem than what we have now. And that's what's been happening over the years. That's why our parking problem has gotten even worse. So instead of addressing it, and instead of fixing it, we're making it worse.
So you think it was a
So
big mistake to allow developers like Ed Russo to allow new tenants to charge for parking? So you think that's something that maybe as new developments come in, we got to end this whole idea of charging extra on top of these rents for parking spaces?
yes, and I believe that. So the developments have created all kinds of issues. I'm not against development. I'm not, I'm in real estate. I own my own properties. I'm not against it. But we have to do it the right way. The way to do development is that development, any town wants to develop because they want to increase their tax base. That's the primary, what I believe, the primary goal for a development. And so when you have a development that's not paying their full share in taxes, then that's a problem. It's going to create other problems. It's going to create traffic congestion. It's going to be a burden on schools. It's going to, be a burden on the police department and fire department and sewers and DPW. So we need more taxes from these developments to make it worthwhile for residents. That's the way that we keep taxes stable and possibly even give homeowners a break. And not just homeowners, because renters are affected by increasing taxes. That's one of the main reasons why landlords raise rents on tenants. Look, I don't like to raise rents on my tenants. And for 5 or 6 years before COVID, I had never raised rents for my tenants. But it came to a certain point where insurance is up, taxes are up, and you have to raise rents. So, I think so that's another problem with the developments is obviously the parking. Like I said before, we keep giving these variances and we keep allowing the developers to charge for parking. Look, they're already charging $2,500, $2,800, $3,000, whatever the case may be,
Right.
for an apartment. Plus they're not paying their full share in taxes. How greedy do you have to be to now charge for parking as well? You're already making a significant profit on these apartments. There's got to be a time where we, our leaders and government, there are leaders. They have to stand up to these things. They can't continue to just allow these people to do whatever they want and get free reign over everything. We have to stop this stuff. And on top of that, these developments, Kevin, I hear people complaining about rent increases constantly, and they're right. It's crazy in town. The way that rents have increased. But one of the main reasons why rent has increased is because of all these new developments. You have landlords that see that they're charging $1,200 for an apartment when the Vermellas are charging $2,500.
Yeah,
So
so
what
I
are they
came
going to
to
do?
Right.
Yeah, it's a market. It's we live in a capitalist society. It's market. Supply and demand. So people are going to see rent increases. And this really hit me. Just a couple of weeks ago when I was talking to someone, a big supporter of mine, who, tough guy. It really affected me because he started, tearing up in front of me, and he said, "I don't know what to do. My rent was $1,250 just a year ago. My landlord raised it, or not even a year ago, like 9 months ago, whatever it was. She raised it $200 or $250. I don't remember now. And now at the end of the year, she's going to raise it another 200, and then she said in 3 months she's going to raise it another 200 or 250. I don't remember what the number is. But can you imagine that? Can you imagine in not even a year and a half to have your rent go up? What is it, 50%, or from $1,250 to $1,800 or $1,850, whatever? That's insane. It's not right. And so, that's part of the issue. It's with development, with progress, comes increased costs. And so that's another problem that we're seeing with the fast development. 4 huge buildings in just a few years. That's going to really change, not only change the face of the town, but economically change everything around us. So that's what other towns experienced, and unfortunately, that's what we're experiencing here now.
If you're just joining us, Syd Ferreira is with us today. He, of course, a mayoral candidate in Kearny. He's run before, but he's running again this year in this unannounced special election. And I want to ask you about something you wrote in your letter, and it's about addressing illegally rented apartments and rooms in town. Uh, this has always been something I think people have been afraid to ever go there. I don't know what the reason is why. Are you going to, if you are elected mayor, put your foot down and say, listen, we got to do something about these illegal apartments because it's obviously a problem. Everybody knows it, but it's never been touched. What are you going to do?
So that's part of the equation when we're talking about helping parking, helping the to alleviate the problems with parking, and that was on the decrease demand side. So we can decrease the demand for parking with public transportation. With like I said, trying to ban or limit the amount of parking fees that can be charged developers, easing parking variances, which we discussed before, and finally addressing illegal apartments. So I'm a landlord, and I get it. Especially here in town, I taxes are so high, all the other expenses are so high, and some landlords, they don't want to increase their existing tenants, so they look for another option. And if they have an open attic, if they have an open basement, it becomes very tempting to rent these spaces or a room, so on and so forth. So the temptation is there because things are so expensive now and taxes are so expensive. So that's something that we have to address. That's where we can start to alleviate the pressures and the demands on landlords, by trying to address our tax rates here in town. Uh, we can also, there are ways, and this is done in other towns where I have properties, there are ways to have an inspector of sorts to go out to look at apartments, and not
Would you
just
do
for
that?
legal apartments. You know, so it's something to explore because it works in other towns, and so that may be something that we can explore here. So the way that that works in other towns, in some other towns, not all towns, but so the DCA, the state New Jersey DCA, is responsible for uh, looking, inspecting every 5 years, inspecting units, inspecting buildings over 3 units and more. So what towns do, certain towns, is what they do is they also have their inspector as well for any units, sometimes owner occupied, sometimes non-owner occupied. I think that we should focus on not non-owner occupied buildings because owner occupied is a little. I mean, if you live there, who's to say you don't have a family member in your basement?
Right.
I mean, that's. So let's start with non-owner occupied units. We can start, with our own inspectors going out just to see problems with the unit. So to and not to be really tough, but just to look at certain things that may be missing or things that may be broken, and then look for illegal units. But we don't even have to go that far, Kevin. Look, I mean, the Observer has ads, Facebook has ads. You know, we see these all the time. We see room being rented. We see uh, basement being rented. Why can't we check these things out? If we look and see, there's 2 units in a building and there's three or four PSE&G meters
Right. Do
or
the
water
math.
meters. We don't even need an inspector because, honestly, more government intrusion is not something that I necessarily agree with. We can look at that option, if we think that it will help, and that's a discussion that we should have as a community. But those are little things that we can do to enforce this. Just start being more attentive. And um, so yeah, I think it's something that we do have to do because I think it is a big problem with parking is that we do have many illegal units, and then sometimes we have, for a 2 bedroom, there may be, landlords that rent it out to 2 different families. So that's, how do you stop that? It's tough, but these are issues that we're going to have to, at some point, address, I think.
As uncomfortable as it may be, it
It
has
is
to be
very,
done. Yeah.
yes. But again, this is leadership, Kevin. These are things that we have to discuss. We can't stop. We can't keep kicking the can down the road. We can't, you know, not say things because we think it's going to politically affect us. Will I lose votes because of what I just said? Probably. But you know what? I'm trying to do the right thing for the town, and I'm trying to speak about things that may be uncomfortable, that have been uncomfortable to speak about. But these are things that we need to do. We can't just not do anything anymore because it's going to, offend this person or offend that person. We have to look at it from a total community perspective and look at how it's going to benefit us as a whole and not just, how it's going to affect certain individuals. And that's what I intend to do.
On the way out here, and I hope we can do this again because I got to be honest, I really enjoy doing this. It's so easy to do it even remotely where you don't even have to come in here. But you're certainly welcome to come in. And I just want everybody else who's watching this to know that this offer's been on the table. Syd was the first to accept it. If any of the other candidates want to accept, they can as well. But right at the get-go, Syd was the first person to say, yeah, I'll come on. And I very much appreciate that, Syd. Thank you for that.
Hopefully we start a trend.
Yeah, absolutely. But one last thing, I just want to get to one more thing on the way out. It was a question I asked earlier. You said you had identified some locations. Where were those locations about where you could put parking?
I think that it's something that maybe I'd like to roll out later on. But for now, so that I can kind of answer your question, I think, and I went there last time, was, we have to work with we have to work with new developments. We have to work with developers to make sure that not only their properties have sufficient parking based on the ordinances that we have, and maybe we need to be a little bit stricter with them, especially for new larger developments, developers like Russo and other developers that are, want to have more than 50 units or 100 units. And then also work with them to maybe provide some parking to the town, where then we may charge residents who don't live there, a certain permit fee or something to be able to park in their space. But as far as, because I don't know the legalities with certain properties, I don't want to give you certain properties, and so.
But you do have some in mind, though, right? That's the bottom line.
Yes, let me investigate it. We'll investigate a little bit more, and then maybe we'll come out with more concrete a concrete plan for that.
Great, Syd. Thank you again for doing this, and we'll do it again.
Yeah, it's just the official first week of the campaign. So.
That's it, right? It's Labor. It's actually like really the first day technically. So I'm sorry, we went a little hard on you just there, but we'll get back to that the next time around. All right. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate you doing this.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Syd. That's Syd Ferreira. He is a candidate for mayor in Kearny. Some interesting thoughts. I would have liked to have heard some of those specific locations that he meant for annexing property, but he says he has identified some locations, and I'll take him at his word. Some other interesting thoughts as well about the commissioner and all the work that they've done to put into this, and that he would completely just nix the idea of a parking utility. And I think that's becoming more and more likely the option that's going to happen, but it's just a question of when. So it is 58 minutes past the hour. I want to thank Syd Ferreira for joining us today, and I want to thank each and every one of you who joined us today live. There's a good number of people in the chat room today, so thank you. I didn't get a chance to respond to any text messages because I had that feature turned off for me. If anybody was out there, I apologize for missing your text, but if there's anything that needs to be addressed, I'll address it later in a reply on Facebook or YouTube or wherever it was that you sent your messages. We will be back 1 week from today, but don't forget to check out this week's edition. It's already at theobserver.com for the September 6th edition. Lots going on there too, and we'll join you live if anything happens during the week. From the newsroom of The Observer and theobserver.com, Kevin Canessa signing off. We'll see you again very